Okay, Epic versus Apple.
Yeah,
A friend of mine did send me a link, and I read about I think it was a judge who said that there's always been this tussle between Apple and Epic. Epic Games is the maker of Fortnite. They, I think a while back, they pulled the app out of the App Store because they didn't want to pay the Apple tax, the 30%. And just, I think it was yesterday, a judge came out and said all the Apple shenanigans to capture payment from Epic and all devs now is over. So we're not going to face that shenanigans. And the shenanigans are basically, Apple had these policies that you couldn't, if you have an in-app payment where the content is consumed as a virtual or digital good, it's consumed in the app, then you can sell people that digital content, but Apple gets a 30% rake on that. So a video game like Fortnite, everything's digital and digitally consumed. Just to make the distinction, something like Uber is not digitally consumed, so it not subject to that same kind of tax. But if it's Fortnite, everything's digitally consumed, so marginal cost is zero basically for them to serve. So Apple says we get 30% of that, and they have such a strong policy on this. You might have seen before if you go on I think the Kindle app on iOS, right? So Apple versus Amazon. Apple, if you try to buy a book, you open your Kindle app, you're like, oh, this is where I go to read. Can I buy a book I want? And because how controlling Apple was on the language, Amazon couldn't say, go to the web to buy this, because that would violate, Apple has control over that language. They won't approve the app. They won't serve it in the App Store. So Amazon used to use this language you can't do that here. Good luck. Maybe other places, I forget the specific thing, but it was very non-descriptive of why it didn't work or what else you should do to mitigate that. And so if you kind of know your way around, you can go to Amazon.com, buy your book, and it'll get into your Kindle, but the app developer can't point you to a website where you get to avoid that 30% tax. So the judge's ruling, I think, from what I saw, had these two components to it. One is you can have alternative payment mechanisms on the web, and Apple can't limit your ability to direct people to use those alternative payment systems. Now, I think that's generally good for the internet and freedom and entrepreneurship and innovation, but I also think it's really good for Bitcoin because Bitcoin's an alternative payment mechanism, and it's something where you could say hey, here's an app, and now I can accept. I mean, this hasn't really been prosecuted. The Epic thing is the one that's been prosecuted, but it kind of opens the door, at least, to the possibility that I could imagine you could accept Bitcoin payments and you could direct people to websites where you could accept Bitcoin payments, and Apple kind of can't really probably do that much about it.
Well, I don't understand. In app though, for example, for Nostr apps like Primal or Damus, does this mean that they can onboard users with Apple Pay and not have to pay the tax to buy the Bitcoin you're using for zapping?
No, I think if you're choosing to use Apple Pay has captured the credit card and they've earned the right to charge you the 30% in their mind. It's just that, early on when Damus first launched, I think they got denied from the App Store because of the zaps at the note level.
Yes.
So you could receive zaps at the profile level, which is just hey, it's a nice tip for Steve because he's a cool guy. But if you zap at the note level, then you're saying, I like this piece of content. I'm kind of buying this piece of content.
That's
serious. So does Primal currently pay 30% of Zap revenue to Apple? I don't think they do.
Well, I think they do if you
why
if you
not?
buy the Bitcoin with Apple Pay.
Yes,
that's the key.
It's the exchange revenue, the USD to Bitcoin exchange revenue. But if I have Bitcoin I got somewhere else, I bring it on Primal and I send it to you.
What's the potential benefit or unlock then for Bitcoin with this new ruling?
Well, you could imagine, I mean, I'm just riffing, but you could imagine that, Primal says, hey, buy some Bitcoin here with Apple Pay, or go to our website, primal.net, and buy Bitcoin cheaper.
Yeah.
So today, if I buy Bitcoin through Primal, Apple gets 30%?
Yes.
I haven't done it recently, but I think that's the case.
So does that mean I'm paying 30% more for my Bitcoin?
I think
Correct.
they have to just mark
So
it up.
if Bitcoin's $100,000, I'm paying $130,000.
I think that's right.
That's right.
Which is a total garbage experience, right?
But you also have to remember, for them, most of the people they're onboarding are noobs. They don't necessarily have Bitcoin. If you already have Bitcoin, great.
Okay.
But
Anyway,
your point,
that helps make it clear.
Yeah.
This could meaningfully make a difference for that.
Yeah.
Could you also, I wonder if this is a boon for progressive web apps. Could you, in addition to just pointing to a website, be like, hey, or you download the PWA version of Primal and you save 30%.
Yeah. Or like save the PWA. You don't even need to download. You're still using old language. Click on this link, visit the PWA, save it to your home screen if you want, and buy there or wherever you want, you know?
The other, another thing that would love to see an Apple policy change on is the use of NFC. So if you recall last fall, Donald Trump went to PubKey in New York, you know, for like a staged Bitcoin payment media opportunity. Yeah.
Man, what are you talking
about? You're just wandering around the streets.
I don't know that for a fact. So, but anyway, and, you know, most people saw that like it failed. The payment failed, which was a major failure for Bitcoin, right? And my understanding of the technical problem was the glare of the lights like we have here made it so the QR code wasn't scanned, and that's what the failure was.
Yeah.
So what if we had NFC payments, right? And even if not for scenarios like that, but just what people are already used to using their iPhone or whatever, Apple Pay is so slick using NFC payments. Well, you can't do that with Bitcoin today. You can do it Android to Android phone. You can do it iPhone to Android. You cannot do it Android to iPhone or iPhone to iPhone. Like the iPhone can't be the recipient.
Why?
Because it requires a certain API in iOS that you have to seek approval from Apple. You have to apply 2 stages of application.
Gatekeepers everywhere.
So they did just introduce this this new API recently to even enable it at all, which is great news. But you still have to get approval. So we do have some open source Bitcoin developers who submitted like a test, like an example app to get the certificates to even develop on it. And they actually did get approval. So that's a good sign.
These are certificates for a third-party app developer to develop on kind of an open NFC.
To open up, use I forget slave master mode or whatever the mode is to be like the card reader mode of NFC to be the receiver.
Yeah.
Cool.
They got approval for that. So the certificates to develop. So now they can build it. Now they can build an app and submit it to the App Store. That's the next gatekeeper and probably the one that is going to like fail, but cross your fingers. Hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully they get in the App Store and then all of a sudden every Bitcoin wallet should submit support for this because it's quite simple. But also maybe this recent ruling is going to make Apple a little more hesitant to deny this.
Yeah.
That's cool. I think it's going to also unlock potentially new businesses in the App Store. So if you have a 30% tax in everything you do, that limits the kinds of businesses, like businesses that wouldn't make that much money or might not make as many sales can't exist. Whereas if you can make, you sort of only pay, I think there's still some fee, or I don't know. There's some drop off. I guess it's probably still 30% if you're in, or I haven't checked all the details on what they're charging. But if you can send people off to a website, even though there's drop off there, but you can still get enough conversion that you can beat the 30% tax, and then you actually might open up new product experiences, new businesses that couldn't have been built before this.
And I want to come back to the PWA thing because I actually wonder if this is like an incredible why now for someone to build a PWA app store. There have been people that have played with this. I think Store.app, Fran's app has played with this a little bit with not exactly PWAs, but for his Nostr open source app store, which is really cool. I forget that the name is leaving me now. But anyways, I wonder if this is a great, especially for the Nostr ecosystem where we already have this alternative payment network, Bitcoin and Lightning, for someone to be like, no, we're going to go all in PWA app store. In fact, put out the call. If someone wants to build a PWA app store right now, this is the why now, using Nostr apps and Bitcoin Lightning payments. I'm very interested from a VC perspective. Because if I know I can go and just like, download the normal app on my iPhone and I have to pay 30% more, or, start saving the PWAs into the PWA app store, which is just, I guess, a folder, a fancy name for a folder. I would do it.
I had a crazy, you might think of this as dystopian, so apologies. I'm too much of a kind of curious explorer. I had an amazing new payment experience this week that I'd never had before, and those rarely happen.
You used WorldCoin?
Oh, man.
I didn't. That's dystopian. This is less. This
That's
is
a topic we're discussing.
substantially less dystopian than that.
Scary.
You guys shop at Whole Foods from time to time? You been in there? Have you ever seen
I've heard of it
that little palm scanner thing?
It's also scary.
A little dystopian, but have you ever used it?
No.
So, it's actually challenging to check out at Whole Foods if you're trying to use they have like an in-store QR code thing, which is like the light problem. And you have to dial up your screen thing so that it hits the scanner, it doesn't work, and they use the other scanner, and then you do your NFC, Apple Pay credit card thing. And the payment experience at Whole Foods is kind of crappy if you're trying to do that. And so if you opt into their dystopian system, which I did because I'm just really curious about how this stuff would all work, you actually get your QR code tied to your credit card. And you have to approve something, like I'm, Jeff Bezos' little bitch or whatever. But but in the future, then you just go there, you put your palm over it, and it just works. Now, I'm interested in this because not so that I can be Jeff Bezos' little bitch, but it's because I think it's like a product experience. You could imagine like having a Nostr key tied to a Bitcoin thing, and you could sort of pay, somebody else could design a new type of terminal that can read from Nostr keys and, sort of turn your
biometrically.
Yeah. So I'm like, I just thought it was like, it's an amazing experience. It has problems, but that kind of thing shows a way that the world could work. Now we want an open version. We want a more pluggable version, but I'd recommend at least looking at it and exploring how it is. I don't say necessarily sign up.
I will not be signing up for that. I'm surprised.
In a future show, we're going to talk about like confidential computing and secure enclaves more. And I think that it's a good segue into a future show.
Yeah.